The doctor's hands were shaking as she stared at my file, and when she finally looked up at me, her face had gone completely white. "Mrs. Morrison," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ultrasound machine, "I need to speak with you privately. Right now." She didn't wait for my answer. She just turned off the monitor, mid-exam, like someone had flipped a switch on my entire life, and walked toward her office. I followed her on autopilot, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My baby. Something's wrong with my baby. That's all I could think. She closed the door behind us. Locked it. Then she turned to face me, and I watched her take a breath like she was about to jump off a cliff. "You need to leave your husband today," she said. "Before you go home. Get a divorce lawyer first." I actually laughed. Laughed out loud. The kind of nervous, confused laugh that comes out when your brain can't process what your ears just heard. "What? Why? We're having a baby together. We're happy. I don't understand." Her expression didn't change. "That's exactly the problem, Mrs. Morrison. What I'm about to show you will change everything you think you know about your marriage." She pulled out a folder from her desk drawer. Her hands were still trembling as she opened it. "I know what your husband did," she said quietly. "And I have proof. That was 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks since my perfect life exploded. 6 weeks since I learned that the man sleeping next to me every night had spent over a year and $65,000 setting a trap designed to destroy me completely. But here's the thing about traps. Sometimes, if you're smart enough and angry enough, you can turn them around. And that's exactly what I did. But let me back up, because you need to understand how I ended up in that office, 5 months pregnant, learning that my entire marriage was built on lies. My name is Vanessa Chen. I'm 37 years old, and I work as a senior brand strategist for a marketing agency in Portland, Oregon. But I also come from money. My great-aunt Melissa passed away 7 years ago and left me her entire estate, a vineyard property in the Willamette Valley plus about $3.2 million in accounts and investments. I never advertised it. I drove a 12-year-old Honda, worked 60-hour weeks, bought my own coffee. The inheritance was my safety net, not my identity. But it made me a target. I met Blake Morrison 5 years ago at a wine industry conference in Napa Valley. I was at the hotel bar escaping some finance bro who'd asked about my portfolio, within 2 minutes, when Blake appeared. Tall, sandy blonde hair, easy smile. He made a joke about the terrible keynote speaker and asked what I thought about organic wine production. Not my bank account. Not my family. Wine. He said he was a wealth management advisor, got a last-minute invitation from a colleague. Claimed he didn't know anything about wine. Looking back, that should have been a massive red flag. A wealth management advisor who doesn't research the industries or key players at a conference he's attending? But I was tired of obvious gold diggers, and here was this charming man asking about my opinions instead of my net worth. We dated for just over a year. Blake remembered tiny details, insisted on paying for dinners, talked about building a future together. My mother Patricia saw through him instantly. After their first meeting, she pulled me aside. "That man's smile doesn't reach his eyes, Vanessa. Something's wrong with him." I told her she was being paranoid, overprotective, even jealous. We fought constantly about Blake. Eventually we stopped talking. 2.5 years of silence between me and the woman who raised me alone after my dad died. Birthday texts and nothing more. All because I chose to believe my husband over my own mother. Spoiler alert, Mom was right about everything. Blake and I got married after 14 months. Beautiful ceremony at Aunt Melissa's vineyard estate. Blake cried during his vows, tears streaming down his face as he promised to love and protect me forever. Looking back, those were probably the most honest tears he ever shed. Not from joy. From relief. His long game was finally paying off. We tried for a baby naturally for almost 2 years. When nothing happened, we saw a fertility specialist. The diagnosis hit like a freight train. Blake had severe male factor infertility, sperm count almost non-existent, natural conception virtually impossible. Blake seemed devastated. He cried in the car for 20 minutes, apologizing over and over like it was his personal failure. I held his hand, told him we'd figure it out together. What I didn't know was that Blake wasn't crying from grief. He was crying because his plan had just gotten more complicated. Those tears were him recalculating, not mourning. We decided on IVF with ICSI, where they inject a single sperm directly into an egg. Blake insisted on researching clinics himself, found Pacific Reproductive Center outside Portland, said they had excellent success rates. He handled all the paperwork, set up appointments, coordinated everything. I thought he was being supportive. I had no idea he was selecting a clinic where he'd already contacted staff members he could bribe. The first cycle failed. Devastating. I couldn't get out of bed for 4 days. Blake held me, whispered encouragement, promised we'd try again. The second cycle, 9 months ago, worked. Positive pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. I cried happy tears. Blake held me tight, already talking about nursery colors and baby names. Then casually he mentioned I should update my will. Now that we're going to be parents, he said, we should make sure everything's in order. It's what responsible parents do. I thought it was sweet, practical. I had no idea he was already counting Aunt Melissa's money as his own. Everything seemed perfect. The loving husband, the baby on the way, the life I'd dreamed about. I had no idea that in just a few months, a stranger with trembling hands would show me documents that would burn my perfect life to the ground. Around 4 months pregnant, something shifted. Small things at first. Blake started keeping his phone face down everywhere, new password I didn't know. He'd step outside to take calls, come back saying client stuff, change the subject. Late night calls at 11 p.m. on Saturdays. He claimed he was restructuring portfolios. I'm pretty sure the stock market takes weekends off. The late nights multiplied. 3 times a week became 5. He wouldn't get home until midnight. He's a wealth advisor, not an ER surgeon. What requires that schedule? I found receipts. A restaurant downtown, $340 for dinner for 2. A hotel in Beaverton, 30 minutes from our house. Why would my husband need a hotel room that close to home? When I asked, Blake had smooth answers that came too quickly. Client dinner, important networking. Conference that ran late, made more sense to stay over. And when I pushed harder, his tone changed. Vanessa, you're being paranoid. It's the hormones. Don't turn into one of those wives. I felt ashamed for asking. That's how good he was. He made me apologize for questioning him. The financial pressure intensified. We should add me to your trust fund. What if something happens during delivery? I need access for the baby. Then power of attorney. Every married couple does this. Unless you don't trust me. The vineyard became his obsession. It's too big anyway. We should sell it, invest the money properly. I know exactly which funds would maximize returns. This man wanted me to sell my family's vineyard and let him invest $5 million. The same man who forgot to pay our electric bill 3 months running. When I said no, gently, his warmth evaporated. He became cold, distant. Started sleeping on the far edge of the bed. The arguments became constant. He'd bring up the trust, I'd refuse, he'd give me silent treatment for days. His silent treatments lasted exactly until he got hungry, funny how that worked. He barely touched me anymore. Said my changing body made him nervous, didn't want to hurt the baby. It sounded caring. It felt like rejection. I tried talking to him about it. He said I was being needy, hormonal, difficult. I started wondering if the problem was me. One night I woke up at 2 a.m. and Blake wasn't in bed. I found him in the kitchen hunched over his phone, speaking in hushed tones. I stood in the hallway and listened. It's almost time, he was saying. By summer, everything will be settled. Just need to wait until. He saw me and hung up immediately. Work emergency. Go back to sleep, honey. I didn't ask who has work emergencies at 2 a.m. about things being settled by summer. I was too tired, too pregnant, too desperate to believe my marriage was still okay. My best friend Maya came over the following week. She watched me make excuse after excuse for Blake. His stress, his work pressure, his adjustment to fatherhood. Finally she put down her fork. Vanessa, when's the last time you talked to your mom? I didn't answer. When's the last time Blake was actually happy to see you? Not performing happy, really genuinely happy. I couldn't answer that either. Trust your gut, Maya said. Something is wrong here. I told her she was being dramatic, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Blake's phone always face down, his late nights, his obsession with accessing my money. The way he looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention, like I was a problem to solve, not a person to love. 5 months pregnant, regular OB appointment. My usual doctor was on vacation, so I was scheduled with a colleague, Dr. Rachel Kim. I went alone. Blake had a client meeting he absolutely couldn't miss. Standard appointment, nothing special. I laid back on the exam table, cold gel on my belly, waiting to see my baby on the screen. Dr. Kim was pleasant, professional. She made small talk while setting up equipment, asked how I was feeling, all the normal questions. Then she opened my file, glanced at the paperwork. Her face changed. She looked at my husband's name, looked at me, back at the name. I saw her hands start trembling. She set down the ultrasound wand, reached over and turned off the monitor completely. Mrs. Morrison, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to speak with you privately right now. I thought something was wrong with the baby. Every worst-case scenario flooded my mind. She walked me to her office, closed the door, locked it. Then she said words that cracked my world open. I know what your husband did, and I have proof. She pulled a folder from her desk. Her hands were still shaking. My partner Jordan works at Pacific Reproductive Center, she said. 3 weeks ago, they came to me crying. They told me everything. When I saw your husband's name on your file just now, I recognized it immediately. Dr. Kim took a deep breath. Mrs. Morrison, I'm so sorry. But you need to see this before you go home. She laid the folder open, and everything I thought I knew about my marriage turned to ash. Jordan worked as a nurse at the fertility clinic, the same clinic Blake had so carefully selected. Rachel explained everything. 3 weeks earlier, Jordan had shown up at their apartment close to midnight, sobbing, hadn't been sleeping, the guilt eating them alive. 9 months ago, Jordan told her, a patient's husband had approached them at the clinic. Charming, well-dressed, seemed desperate but reasonable. He had a special situation requiring discretion. His wife didn't know, he explained, but he was using donor sperm for their IVF cycle. Family genetic issue he didn't want to burden her with. He'd pay well for assistance. $65,000 for a nurse making $54,000 a year drowning in student loans. Impossible to refuse. Jordan helped switch the samples. Blake's sperm was replaced with sperm from a paid donor. The embryologist was in on it too. Blake had approached him separately with another payment. Between the two of them, the switch went undetected. The embryologist told Jordan not to worry, the husband knows what he's doing, not our business what arrangements married couples make. But it ate at Jordan, especially when they saw the pregnancy was successful. Somewhere was a woman carrying a baby she believed was her husband's child. And it wasn't. The guilt destroyed them. Panic attacks at work. Called in sick constantly. 3 weeks ago, they finally broke and told Rachel everything. I sat in that office listening to Dr. Kim explain how my husband had spent $65,000 to frame me for cheating. More than he spent on our entire wedding. But there was more. So much more. Rachel laid out the complete scheme Blake had been building piece by piece. Phase 1, already complete, bribe the clinic staff, switch the samples, ensure silence. Phase 2, also complete, wait for successful pregnancy, play devoted father-to-be, build the perfect image. Phase 3, plan for afterbirth, have the embryologist alter clinic records to show our second IVF cycle failed, making it appear we conceived naturally afterward. Phase 4, the trap, after the birth, suggest a DNA test, frame it as something sweet and sentimental, proof of fatherhood for the nursery. Phase 5, the kill shot, when the DNA test proved he wasn't the biological father, and medical records showed natural conception, he'd have evidence his wife cheated. The baby wasn't his. He was the victim. Our prenup had an infidelity clause. Common in wealthy families. If one spouse cheats, they owe the other $500,000, forfeit any claim to the other's property, and the wronged spouse can sue for additional damages. Blake's endgame was crystal clear. He'd walk away with $500,000 minimum, destroy my reputation, probably get more in a lawsuit, and I'd be so devastated and desperate to protect my child that I wouldn't fight back effectively. He was counting on my shame to make me compliant. Dr. Kim pulled more documents. Jordan had saved everything. Original sample records showing the switch, the donor's ID number, payment records traced to accounts Blake controlled. Email communications between Blake and the embryologist. Vague language, but enough. More than enough. Jordan had tracked down the donor too. Marcus Webb, 29-year-old graduate student, paid $20,000 in cash. Normal sperm donation pays maybe $100, sometimes $200. $20,000 should have been a massive red flag, but student loans don't pay themselves. Marcus was told it was a private arrangement for extra discretion. He had no idea he was part of fraud. When he found out, he was furious and willing to cooperate. There was one more thing, Rachel said carefully. Her own research had uncovered something. Blake Morrison had $240,000 in gambling debts. Years of online poker, sports betting, casino trips he'd called business conferences. And the money for the bribes, the $65,000 he'd paid to corrupt my IVF? He'd embezzled it from his own clients at Sterling Wealth Advisors. Small amounts over time, carefully hidden. His firm had no idea yet. Blake wasn't just trying to steal my inheritance. He was drowning, grabbing at anything within reach. His gambling debts were crushing him. The people he owed weren't patient bankers, they were the kind who don't file lawsuits. I was supposed to be his life raft. Aunt Melissa's money was supposed to save him, and he was willing to destroy me completely to get it. I sat in that office for a long time, papers spread out, truth burning a hole in my chest. Shock came first, cold and paralyzing. Then disbelief. I kept reading documents over and over, looking for some mistake that would make everything okay. Then the pieces started clicking. The late nights, secret calls, his obsession with my money, his careful attention when we were dating. He'd researched me before we ever met. The wine conference where we accidentally bumped into each other wasn't an accident. He knew exactly who I was and what I was worth before he said hello. The way he cried at our wedding, those tears I thought came from joy, they were relief. His long con was finally paying off. And my mother Patricia, who I'd pushed away for 2.5 years, who I'd called paranoid and jealous, she'd seen through him in 5 minutes. She tried to warn me. I chose him over her. I thought about crying. I thought about screaming. I thought about driving home and confronting him, throwing papers in his face. But then something else happened. Something cold settled into my stomach. Something sharp and focused and absolutely calm. He thought I was stupid. He'd built this entire scheme assuming I would crumble, that when his trap sprung I'd be so devastated I'd hand over whatever he wanted just to make it stop. He thought I was weak, naive, an easy mark. He had no idea who he'd married. I looked at Dr. Kim. He doesn't know that I know. No, Jordan hasn't told anyone else. I only connected you to the case when I saw your file today. Good. I gathered the documents carefully. I need copies of everything. And I need you to connect me with Jordan directly. What are you going to do? I stood up, My hand resting on my belly, on the baby who was completely innocent in all this. My husband thinks he's been playing chess. He thinks he's 3 moves ahead. He thinks he's already won. I straightened my shoulders. He's about to find out I already flipped the board. I drove home with my face carefully neutral, hands steady on the wheel, breathing even. Blake had installed security cameras around our house 2 years ago. At the time he said it was for protection. Now I wondered if it was surveillance, if he watched footage looking for any sign I suspected something. So I gave him nothing. He was waiting in the kitchen with that smile that didn't reach his eyes. My mother's words echoed. "How was the appointment?" he asked. "Is the baby okay?" I smiled back, walked over and hugged him, showed him the ultrasound photo Dr. Kim had printed. "Perfect," I said. "Everything's absolutely perfect. I deserve an Oscar for that performance." I smiled at him over dinner while mentally calculating his bail amount. I asked about his day while picturing him in an orange jumpsuit. I even laughed at his terrible joke about baby names, committed to the role like my life depended on it, because in a way it did. I apologized for being paranoid lately. Blamed the hormones, used the exact excuse he'd thrown at me for months. His whole body relaxed when he heard it. The tension in his shoulders melted. He thought he was still winning. That night, he slept soundly beside me. I lay awake until 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, planning his destruction. Before we get to what happened next, I need to tell you something about this channel. I collect real stories from Reddit, Quora, and other forums with people's consent, change names and circumstances to protect privacy, and add psychological analysis so we can all learn from these experiences. If you're finding value in this story, hit that subscribe button because understanding these patterns could save you or someone you love from a similar situation. Now, back to how I took down the man who thought he could destroy me. The next morning I called in sick to work. Then I drove 2 hours to a different city, checking my mirrors constantly. Paranoid maybe, but I'd earned that paranoia. I found a private investigator named Denise Torres, ex-police detective, 15 years on the force before going private. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, took notes, and when I finished she smiled like a shark who'd just spotted blood in the water. "Your husband made a lot of mistakes," she said. "Arrogant men always do. But before I tell you what Denise found, I need to explain what Blake actually did to me, psychologically speaking, because this wasn't just fraud. This was a masterclass in manipulation, and understanding it changed everything about how I approached taking him down. What Blake did is called long-con romance fraud, and it's way more common than people think. The psychology behind it is actually fascinating in the most disturbing way possible. These predators, and that's what they are, they don't just lie to you. They study you. They become exactly who you need them to be. It's like they're method actors, except the role is, your perfect partner, and the stage is your entire life. There's this concept in psychology called love bombing. It's the first phase of the cycle. Overwhelming affection, constant attention, remembering every tiny detail about you, making you feel like you finally found someone who truly sees you. Blake did this perfectly. The peonies instead of roses, paying for dinners, asking about wine production instead of my bank account. He was building what psychologists call a trust foundation, but it was all scaffolding with nothing underneath. The second you're hooked, really hooked, the scaffolding starts coming down piece by piece. Then comes the isolation phase. This is where they separate you from your support system, especially from anyone who might see through them. Blake did this by making me fight with my mother. He never directly told me to cut her off, that would have been too obvious. Instead, he played the hurt, misunderstood victim. My mom's suspicions became attacks on him. My questions became me choosing her over our marriage. He made me feel like I had to pick a side, and because I was in the love bombing fog, I picked him. Classic isolation tactic. There's actually research on this. Dr. Martha Stout at Harvard wrote about sociopathic manipulation, and one thing she found is that these people bank on something called the consistency principle. Once you've publicly defended someone, once you've burned bridges for them, you become psychologically invested in being right about them. Admitting you were wrong means admitting you damaged other relationships for nothing. So you double down. You ignore red flags. You explain away behavior that should send you running. I did exactly this with my mother for 2.5 years. The financial abuse Blake attempted is its own special category of horror. It's called economic grooming, and it happens in stages. First, they get you comfortable with small financial entanglements. Shared expenses, joint accounts for household stuff, nothing that sets off alarms. Then they escalate. Power of attorney, access to trusts, selling major assets. They frame every request as practical, loving even. I need to protect you and the baby. Don't you trust me? It's manipulation disguised as partnership. And the gaslighting, oh my God, the gaslighting. When I questioned his late nights and secret phone calls, Blake didn't just deny wrongdoing. He made me question my own perception of reality. You're being paranoid. It's the hormones. Don't turn into one of those wives. That's textbook gaslighting. Making the victim doubt their own judgment, their own instincts, their own sanity. There's research showing that gaslighting actually changes brain patterns over time. It creates this constant state of self-doubt that makes you easier to control. The fertility clinic scheme was next-level sociopathic because it weaponized my own body against me. He turned my pregnancy, something that should have been joyful, into evidence of my supposed betrayal. Psychologists call this manufactured evidence in fraud cases. He wasn't just lying, he was creating an entire false reality with documentation to back it up. The altered medical records, the bribed staff, the planted donor. He built a complete alternate version of events where I was the villain. What really gets me, and this is where I felt actual rage sitting in that doctor's office, is that Blake's whole plan relied on shame. He was counting on me being so humiliated by the accusation of infidelity that I wouldn't fight back. There's this thing called stigma exploitation that abusers use. They know certain accusations carry social weight, especially for women. Infidelity, being a bad mother, being crazy or hysterical. These accusations make people freeze up, get defensive, try to prove they're not those things. Blake was planning to use that paralysis to steal everything from me. The gambling addiction adds another layer. Addicts become increasingly desperate and their moral boundaries dissolve. Blake wasn't evil from birth. He made choices that led him down a path where defrauding his own wife seemed reasonable. The debt, the pressure from whoever he owed money to, it created this desperation that overrode any love or loyalty he might have felt. If he ever felt those things at all, which honestly, I doubt. Sitting with all this information, understanding the psychology behind what he'd done, something shifted in me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was clear. I understood exactly what he was and how he operated. And understanding your enemy is the first step to destroying them. Blake thought he was playing a game I didn't know existed. But now I knew all the rules, all the plays, all the tactics. And I was about to show him what happens when the target becomes the hunter. When the mark flips the script. When the easy victim turns out to be anything but. He thought he married a naive woman with money. He married a woman who, once she understood she'd been played, would burn his entire world down and sleep like a baby afterward. Denise Torres had results in 12 days. Blake's gambling debts totaled $240,000. He owed money to online betting sites, underground poker games, and private lenders who definitely didn't file paperwork with the IRS, the kind of creditors who get very creative when payments are late. The embezzlement was confirmed. Approximately $67,000 missing from client accounts at Sterling Wealth Advisors, siphoned over 20 months through small transactions designed to avoid detection. His bosses had no idea yet, but Denise had documentation that would bury him. And then there was the affair. 10 months, his administrative assistant Courtney, hotel rooms, romantic dinners, weekend getaways disguised as conferences. Denise had photos, text messages, credit card receipts, the whole pathetic collection. His assistant, of course it was his assistant. How completely unoriginal. If you're going to destroy your marriage, at least show some creativity. Having an affair with your assistant is literally chapter 1 of the cheating husband handbook. Denise found something else too. This wasn't Blake's first attempt at landing a wealthy woman. 6 years ago he dated someone in Seattle, Amanda Sullivan, family money, trust fund, the whole package. They were together for 9 months before she discovered financial irregularities in a joint account he'd convinced her to open. She ended things immediately but was too embarrassed to press charges. Denise tracked her down. Amanda was more than willing to provide a statement now. She'd always regretted letting him walk away clean. I met with Jordan in secret, a coffee shop an hour from town where nobody would recognize us. They looked terrible, thin, pale, dark circles under their eyes. The guilt had been eating them alive. They started crying the moment I sat down. "I'm so sorry," they kept saying. I knew it was wrong, I just needed the money and he was so convincing, I stopped them. "Are you willing to testify officially, on the record?" They nodded without hesitation. "I'll tell them everything." I should have gone to the police the day after it happened. I looked at them for a long moment. This person had helped my husband try to destroy me. They'd taken $65,000 to participate in fraud. By any measure they were complicit. But Blake had manipulated them the same way he'd manipulated me. He'd found their weakness and exploited it. He was the architect. They were just a tool. "Don't be scared anymore," I told them. "You're not the villain in this story. He is." The embryologist, once he learned Jordan was cooperating and had kept records, developed a sudden and convenient conscience. He gave his own statement to Denise. He was terrified of losing his medical license and going to prison. He'd say whatever we needed to put Blake away. The hardest call I made was to my mother. 2.5 years of near silence. 2.5 years of choosing Blake over her. I defended him when she questioned his motives. I'd stopped inviting her to holidays. I'd called her jealous, paranoid, unable to accept that I was happy. And she'd been right about everything. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Vanessa." Her voice was cautious, hopeful, like she'd been waiting for this call but didn't want to jinx it. "Mom." My voice cracked on the word. "You were right about everything. About him. And I'm so sorry." There was a pause. I braced myself for the "I told you so" she'd earned. For the anger, the resentment, the hurt I'd caused by choosing a con man over the woman who raised me alone. Instead she said, "What do you need, sweetheart?" She didn't gloat. She didn't remind me of every warning I'd ignored. She didn't point out that she'd tried to tell me for years. She just asked how she could help. That broke me more than anything else had. I sobbed on the phone for 10 minutes while my mother waited patiently, making soft comforting sounds, being exactly who she'd always been. My mom is a retired attorney, specialized in estate law for 30 years. Within 48 hours she'd connected me with the best divorce lawyer in Oregon and a prosecutor who specialized in fraud cases. My mom taught me something that day. The people who really love you don't need to be right. They just need you to be okay. My lawyer was a woman named Linda Fernandez, 5'2", silver hair, reading glasses perpetually perched on her nose. She looked like someone's sweet grandmother. She was a shark in a cardigan. Linda reviewed everything, the clinic documents, Jordan's statement, Denise's findings, the affair evidence, the embezzlement records. When she finished she looked up at me over those reading glasses and smiled. "Your husband is facing fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement charges. The prenup infidelity clause works in your favor now because he's the one who's been cheating. And his scheme to falsify medical records after the birth, that's a felony he was planning to commit. We have evidence of intent." She coordinated with the prosecutor. Jordan gave a formal sworn statement to police. The embryologist cooperated in exchange for reduced charges. Blake's firm was quietly alerted about the missing funds. They began their own investigation and immediately froze his access to client accounts. A judge reviewed the evidence, found probable cause, issued an arrest warrant for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. My lawyer called it a formality at this point. I called it the best piece of paper I'd ever seen in my life. 8.5 by 11 inches of pure karma. Now came the hard part. I had to go home every night and pretend everything was normal. I had to sleep next to this man knowing exactly what he was planning to do to me. I had to smile and make small talk and let him touch my belly and talk about our future while mentally counting down the days until his arrest. Blake had no idea that while he was perfecting his devoted husband act, I was building a case that would put him in prison. Every time he brought up accessing my trust fund, I'd deflect gently, playing the hormonal pregnant wife who just couldn't think about financial planning right now. Every time he mentioned the vineyard, I'd say we'd talk about it after the baby came. I gave him just enough hope to keep him complacent. He thought he was still in control. He thought his plan was still on track. He thought I was still the naive woman who'd chosen him over her own mother. He had absolutely no idea that the woman lying next to him had become his worst nightmare. 7 weeks after that ultrasound appointment, I suggested to Blake that we throw a celebration, a harvest festival party at Aunt Melissa's vineyard estate. Both families, close friends, an afternoon gathering to celebrate the baby coming soon. His eyes lit up like Christmas morning. More witnesses to his devoted husband performance. More people who would feel sorry for him later when his wife was exposed as a cheater. More fuel for the sympathy he was planning to milk. "That's a wonderful idea," he said, kissing my forehead in that gentle way that used to make me feel safe. "Let me help plan everything." No, I patted his chest. "You've been working so hard lately, all those late nights at the office. Let me handle the party. You just show up and enjoy it." He had no idea that my version of handling everything included police officers waiting in the guest cottage, my lawyer stationed near the bar, Marcus Webb ready to testify, every piece of evidence organized in folders, and his own parents about to learn exactly who their son really was. The party was scheduled for Saturday. Blake spent that morning practicing expressions in the mirror, adjusting his tie, rehearsing his excited father smile. I watched him through the crack in the door. This man I'd shared a bed with for 4 years. This man I'd trusted with my future, my family, my heart. He thought he was walking into his crowning achievement. He had no idea he was walking into his own funeral. Aunt Melissa's vineyard estate in late spring, the vines heavy with early grapes, my great-aunt's gardens in full bloom. White tents on the back lawn. Wine chilling in silver buckets. Flowers arranged on every table. A string quartet playing softly near the rose bushes. 60 guests milling about in their Sunday best. Family, friends, colleagues. Blake's parents had driven up from Sacramento, so proud of their successful son and his beautiful pregnant wife. Blake was in his absolute element, working the crowd like a politician at a fundraiser. Handshakes, backslaps, that charming laugh he'd perfected over years of practice. His hand kept finding my belly for photos. Every time someone pointed a camera, there he was, the devoted father-to-be, gazing at me with what looked like adoration. He was so good at pretending to be human. Blake's mother kept dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. "I always knew he'd make a wonderful father," she told anyone who would listen. His father walked around shaking hands, chest puffed out, proud of the family Blake was supposedly building. My own mother stood near the dessert table watching Blake with the patient expression of a cat observing a mouse that doesn't know it's trapped. She caught my eye across the lawn and raised her wine glass slightly. Almost time. Around 3 o'clock Blake did exactly what I knew he would do. He'd been dropping hints for weeks about wanting to celebrate fatherhood with a DNA test, frame the results in the nursery, so romantic, so meaningful. At the party he brought it up again loudly, making sure plenty of people could hear. "You know what we should do, honey?" He pulled me close, arm around my waist, playing to the crowd. "I've been thinking, let's get one of those DNA test kits. We can frame the results for the nursery, proof that daddy and baby are connected forever. Wouldn't that be special?" Several guests made sounds. His mother dabbed her eyes again. I pretended to hesitate. "Oh, I don't know, that seems like a lot of trouble." "Come on, it'll be amazing. We could even open the results right here, right now, Make it part of the celebration. What do you think, everyone? Encouraging murmurs from the crowd. Someone said how sweet. Someone else mentioned they wished their husband was that thoughtful. Well, I looked around playing the shy wife. If everyone thinks it's a good idea. Blake was practically glowing. This was his moment. The trap he'd spent over a year building was about to snap shut. He could already taste my money, my humiliation, my destruction. He just didn't realize whose neck was in the trap. Instead of pulling out a DNA kit, I walked toward the small platform we'd set up near the fountain, the one meant for toasts and speeches. I picked up the microphone. Blake smiled up at me from the crowd, champagne in hand, already rehearsing his shocked, devastated face. "Thank you all for coming today," I said, my voice carrying across the lawn. "This party is supposed to be about celebration, about family, about truth." I found Blake's eyes in the crowd. "My husband said he wanted to reveal something special today, so I'm going to help him do exactly that." His smile flickered just for a second, the first crack in his performance. I reached under the podium and pulled out a folder. 4 months ago I learned something about my husband that changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I want to share it with all of you today because Blake is right, this should be about truth. Blake's smile was frozen now. His champagne glass had stopped halfway to his lips. Blake and I struggled with fertility. His diagnosis meant natural conception was impossible. So we did IVF at Pacific Reproductive Center, a clinic he chose. I held up the first document. These are the records from that clinic, the original records before anyone had a chance to alter them. I let that word hang in the air. Original. Blake's face went pale. These records show that my husband bribed 2 clinic employees to switch his sperm sample with donor sperm. He paid $65,000 to a nurse and an embryologist, and he paid $20,000 to a young man named Marcus Webb. I gestured toward the edge of the crowd. Marcus stepped forward, a 29-year-old grad student who'd thought he was helping an infertile couple. To provide the sperm that was used to conceive my child, without my knowledge, without my consent. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Blake's mother grabbed his father's arm. Someone dropped a wine glass and it shattered on the patio stones. My husband's plan was simple, I continued. Wait until our child was born, demand a DNA test, and when the results proved he wasn't the biological father, which he already knew would happen, he would accuse me of having an affair. I held up more documents. Our prenup has an infidelity clause. If I had supposedly cheated, would owe him $500,000. He could sue for additional damages. He could destroy my reputation. He could take everything my aunt left me and walk away. Blake found his voice. It came out strangled, desperate. "Vanessa, honey, this is insane. You're confused, it's the pregnancy, the hormones, you're not thinking clearly." I'm not finished. My voice was ice. The crowd went silent. In addition to bribing the fertility clinic, my husband embezzled approximately $67,000 from his clients at Sterling Wealth Advisors to fund this scheme. I looked at a man standing near the bar, Blake's boss, who'd been quietly invited. His firm is now aware and investigating. My husband also has $240,000 in gambling debts, money he owes to people who don't take late payments kindly. And for the past 10 months, I pulled out the photographs, nothing explicit but romantic enough to leave no doubt. He's been having an affair with his administrative assistant. Blake's mother made a sound like she'd been punched. This wasn't even his first attempt, I added. 6 years ago in Seattle he targeted another woman with family money. That relationship ended when she discovered financial irregularities. She's provided a statement to investigators and is prepared to testify. Blake's champagne glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the stone patio and exploded, champagne spraying across his expensive shoes. "Those are lies," he stammered. "She's making this up, she's mentally unstable, the pregnancy has affected her mind." Blake. His own mother's voice cut through the noise, quiet but sharp enough to draw blood. "Is any of this true?" He turned to face her, opened his mouth to deny everything. Nothing came out. Jordan stepped forward from where they'd been standing near the guest cottage, pale but determined. "I'm the nurse he bribed," they said. "I have documentation of everything. I've already given my statement to police." Marcus Webb spoke up next. "He paid me $20,000 and told me it was a private arrangement. I had no idea I was part of fraud until Mrs. Morrison's investigator contacted me last month." Blake looked around wildly at the faces of people who'd been laughing with him 10 minutes ago. His colleagues, his family, the society friends he'd worked so hard to impress. Everyone was staring at him like he was something rotting they'd just discovered on their shoe. Then 2 police officers stepped out from the guest cottage, walking calmly across the lawn. "Blake Morrison, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent." They handcuffed him right there in front of everyone. His mother was sobbing now. His father refused to look at him, staring at the ground like he wished it would open up and swallow him. As they walked him toward the police car, Blake tried one last time. "Vanessa, please." His voice cracked. "We can work this out. I made mistakes but I love you, I've always loved you. Don't do this, think about our baby, think about our family." I looked at him, really looked at the man I'd shared my life with for 4 years, the man I'd defended to my own mother, the man who'd stood at an altar and promised to love and protect me while calculating how much he could steal. "You're absolutely right, Blake," I said. "We just worked it out." They put him in the back of the police car. I watched it drive away down the long gravel path, past the vineyards my great-aunt had planted half a century ago, through the iron gates of the property Blake had wanted so desperately to own. 60 guests stood in absolute silence. Then my mother walked up and put her arm around my shoulders. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. "Your aunt would be too." And for the first time in months, I took a full breath. Blake was denied bail. "Flight risk," the judge said. Between his gambling debts and the people he owed money to, there was too much chance he'd disappear. Those gambling creditors got very interested very quickly once the arrest made the news. They'd been patient while Blake had a wealthy wife. That patience evaporated the moment they realized the money train had derailed. His affair partner Courtney, the assistant he'd been sneaking around with for 10 months, resigned from Sterling Wealth Advisors the morning after the party. Didn't even clean out her desk, just sent an email and vanished. She didn't wait for the handcuffs to click shut before she ran. I've seen rats leave sinking ships with more loyalty. Blake's firm completed their internal investigation within 2 weeks. $67,000 confirmed missing. They filed their own criminal charges. The woman from Seattle, Amanda Sullivan, came forward publicly once she heard about the arrest. She'd spent 6 years feeling stupid for falling for his act, too embarrassed to pursue justice. She wasn't embarrassed anymore. Her statement added another layer to the case prosecutors were building. The divorce was finalized in record time. Blake's lawyer tried to negotiate but there was nothing to negotiate with. The prenup's infidelity clause, the one Blake had been planning to weaponize against me, worked in my favor now. He was the one who'd been unfaithful for 10 months. He owed me, not the other way around. Not that he had anything to give. Every asset he claimed to own was either borrowed, stolen, or imaginary. The criminal case moved quickly. Jordan testified. The embryologist cooperated fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. Marcus Webb provided his statement. The paper trail Blake thought he'd hidden wasn't hidden at all. Fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement, each charge stuck, each charge carried years. His parents stopped coming to court after the first week. His father released a statement saying Blake had made choices that no parent can defend. His mother checked into a facility for exhaustion, which is what wealthy people call it when they can't face reality. Blake Morrison, who had walked into my life 5 years ago with such careful charm, would spend the next several years in prison. When he eventually got out he'd have nothing. No money, no career, no family willing to acknowledge him, no future targets who wouldn't find his criminal record with a simple search of his name. The trap he'd built so patiently and so carefully had snapped shut on his own neck. My baby was born 5 months after the party. Healthy, perfect, absolutely innocent in everything that had happened. Some people asked if I was going to contact Marcus Webb, include him somehow. I thought about it. But Marcus was a 29-year-old grad student who'd made a dumb decision for money he desperately needed. He wasn't ready to be a father, he didn't want to be, and I didn't need him to be. My child would have me, would have my mother finally back in my life where she belonged, would have the entire Chen family, the legacy my aunt built over decades of love and work. That was more than enough. That was everything. I learned something through all of this. Family isn't about DNA. It's not about blood tests or biology or genetic matches on a chart. Family is about who shows up, who stays, who chooses you every single day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. My mother chose me when I didn't deserve it. I chose my baby when the circumstances were complicated. That's what family actually means. My mother and I had lunch every week now, making up for 2.5 lost years, one conversation at a time. She never said, "I told you so," not once. Finally I asked her why. She set down her coffee cup and smiled. Because watching you take down that man was more satisfying than any 4 words could ever be. I laughed, first real laugh in what felt like forever. For weeks after the party, early morning, I sat in Aunt Melissa's kitchen, my kitchen now, in the house Blake had coveted so desperately. Sunlight poured through windows that had watched 4 generations of Chen women live their lives. The same windows my great-aunt had looked through while drinking her morning tea 60 years ago. I made myself a cup of chamomile, her recipe, her favorite brand. Some traditions are worth keeping. My phone buzzed on the counter, text from my mother asking about lunch tomorrow. I smiled and typed back, always. Outside the gardens were in full bloom. The roses Aunt Melissa planted when she was a young bride. The hydrangeas she added when my mother was born.